It ran behind the poorest neighborhoods, a dull ribbon of gray-green water twisting past rusted fences and half-forgotten factories. To those who lived uptown, it was nothing more than a line on an old map, something that had once mattered and no longer did. To the people of Brookside Town, it was everything. Water for washing, for cooking when money was short, for children who had nowhere else to play. And to Victor Hargreave, it was a convenient place to hide his sins. Victor owned Hargreave Industrial Solutions, a chemical manufacturing company praised for its efficiency and profit margins. Investors admired him, politicians shook his hand, newspapers called him a visionary. What they did not print was that every night, when inspectors had gone home and office lights dimmed, pipes beneath his factory opened like silent mouths and poured waste into the river. The liquid slid into the water smoothly, almost beautifully, dissolving as if it belonged there. Victor told himself it was necessary. Proper disposal was expensive. Regulations were vague. Everyone bent the rules. If he didn't do it, his competitors would. That was how shortcuts worked. They only looked immoral when someone else took them. Downstream, people began to get sick. It started quietly. Skin rashes that wouldn't heal, stomach pains that doctors dismissed as stress or poor diet, children coughing through the night, their breaths shallow and wheezing. When old Mr. Alvarez collapsed in the street, foaming at the mouth, people finally grew afraid. But fear in Brookside Town was a familiar thing, and like hunger, it was often ignored. Aisha Khan noticed the pattern before anyone else. She was a nurse at the small community clinic, a low concrete building with flickering lights and a constant smell of antiseptic. Aisha had grown up in Brookside Town. She knew its rhythms, its silences, the way people learn to endure. When patients came in, she didn't just see symptoms. She saw neighbors, cousins, people she had shared childhood summers with near the riverbank. At first, she treated what she could: creams for rashes, IV fluids for dehydration, gentle reassurances spoken in a calm voice. But the cases kept coming, and they were getting worse. Kidney problems, respiratory failure, birth defects that made mothers cry quietly into their scarves. Aisha began to write everything down. She stayed late after her shifts, poring over patient records, noting addresses, dates, water sources. She took photographs of lesions with patients' consent. She collected water samples from the river in reused plastic bottles, labeling them carefully. When the clinic's old printer jammed, she rewrote notes by hand. It was slow, exhausting work, but something in her refused to stop. This wasn't random. It couldn't be. When she sent the samples to a private lab using her savings, the results confirmed what she already feared: heavy metals, toxic byproducts, levels far beyond what any human body could tolerate for long. The river was poisoning them. Aisha went to the local authorities first. She brought her notes, her photographs, her lab reports. The man behind the desk skimmed the pages, sighed, and slid them back to her. These things take time, and proof, real proof. "This is real proof," Aisha replied, her voice tight. He avoided her eyes. "You should be careful. Big companies don't like accusations." That night, Aisha sat by her window listening to distant factory hums and made a decision. If the system wouldn't listen politely, she would make it impossible to ignore. She contacted environmental lawyers, journalists, advocacy groups. Some never replied, others promised help and vanished, but a few listened. A young reporter came to Brookside Town and filmed the river, its unnatural sheen catching the light. An environmental NGO sent independent testers who confirmed the contamination. A lawsuit was filed, thick with evidence and names. Victor Hargreave laughed when his legal team first told him. "This is nothing," he said, leaning back in his leather chair. We'll settle quietly, pay a fine, move on. But this time, it didn't go quietly. The story spread. Images of sick children and polluted water appeared on screens across the country. Shareholders asked questions. Regulators reopened old files. The river, once invisible, became a symbol of corporate cruelty. Victor's laughter faded as subpoenas arrived. In court, Aisha testified with a calm that surprised even her. She spoke of patients who couldn't afford bottled water, of mothers who blamed themselves for children born ill, of a river that had been turned into a dumping ground because its people were deemed unimportant. Victor sat stiffly, avoiding her gaze. The ruling shocked everyone. The judge didn't just impose fines, he ordered Hargreave Industrial Solutions to fund comprehensive health care for Brookside Town for the next 20 years, a fully equipped hospital, long-term treatment programs, environmental cleanup monitored by independent agencies. And then came the part that made the courtroom fall silent. Victor Hargreave was required to live in Brookside Town for 5 years. Not as a visitor, as a resident. He would occupy a modest house near the river. He would attend community meetings. He would report weekly to the hospital board. He would not leave without permission. This is not punishment, the judge said. It is accountability. Victor felt something crack inside him. Not fear exactly, but the collapse of distance. The safe space between his actions and their consequences had disappeared. The first night in Brookside Town, Victor couldn't sleep. The house smelled faintly of dampness. The river murmured outside, a constant reminder. There were no city lights here, no tinted windows or private security, just the sound of coughing from a neighboring house carried through thin walls. In the mornings, he walked to the hospital construction site, escorted not by guards, but by stairs. People recognized him. Some looked angry, others looked tired, a few looked curious, as if trying to understand how a single man could cause so much harm. Aisha watched him from a distance at first. She didn't feel triumph, only a heavy, complicated relief. The fight had consumed years of her life. Now the work of healing had truly begun. When the hospital opened, Aisha was promoted to oversee patient care programs. One afternoon, she found Victor sitting in the waiting area, his expensive suit replaced by plain clothes, his posture uncertain. He looked up as she passed. "You're the nurse, the one who started this." "I didn't start it," Aisha replied evenly. "You did." He flinched, then nodded. "May I ask you something?" She hesitated, then sat across from him. "Do you think that I knew what I was doing?" Aisha studied his face. He looked older here, stripped of power and polish, human. "I think you knew it was cheaper, and you chose to not know the rest." Victor swallowed. Days turned into months. Victor attended patient briefings, listened to doctors explain chronic illnesses caused by long-term exposure. He met parents who spoke softly about children who would never fully recover. He watched as dialysis machines hummed beside patients whose kidneys had failed. Statistics now had a face. One evening, he walked to the riverbank alone. The cleanup had begun. Machines dredged sludge from the bottom. Signs warned against contact. The water no longer gleamed. It looked wounded. Victor remembered signing off on reports without reading them. Remembered saying, "It's within acceptable limits." Standing there, the phrase felt obscene. He began to speak at community meetings. Not to defend himself, but to explain, to admit, to answer questions no one else ever had. Some people shouted, others listened in silence, a few nodded, not in forgiveness, but in recognition of shared reality. Aisha noticed the change cautiously. One day, Victor approached her with a proposal. He said, "I want to fund mobile clinics for people who can't reach the hospital and scholarships for local students to study environmental science and healthcare." She searched his expression for calculation and found none, only urgency. "Do it," she said, "but do it quietly. This isn't about your image." He agreed. Years passed. Brookside Town slowly healed, not completely, never entirely, but enough for children to play again without fear, enough for elders to sit by the river without coughing. The hospital became a center of learning and care. The river, though scarred, began to clear. On Victor's last required day in Brookside Town, he stood beside Aisha near the water. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I see it now, all of it." Aisha looked at the river, at the reflection of clouds moving gently across its surface. Seeing doesn't erase what happened, but it changes what happens next. Victor nodded.